The one I was looking at, I was just kind of going through it really quickly while you were finishing up with the other group. The food label discussion.
Mm-hmm. Oh, on week 3?
Yes, because on week 2, we already discussed what we found. So I guess
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
kind of
but
confused what this one is for.
this is just talking to other students about it.
Okay.
So you're just talking, you know, and say, hey, that was fun, or that was weird. What did I learn from it? And you then share with the other classmates a little
Okay.
video. That way, because a lot of times, oh, here are the questions. What did you learn about the food analyzed? What impact did the exercise have on your food choices? And that way we just we always kind of finish up those activities with a little reflection on it, the health kit activities.
Okay. And then the other thing was the cell model. Let me go back to that.
That's a good one. So there, when we learn about the cell, learn the different parts of the cell. Let me go to that. And you saw that cake, right? So that's
yes. That's quite interesting there.
I got somebody made a 3-dimensional electronic image that I could turn around in the computer.
Oh wow.
Once that was a Merced student. That was really cool. So when we look at, come on, the cell, this is the cell. We have, you know, how the cell is made basically, and we have all these different things in the cell that do different things, like the mitochondria makes energy, and this is where we have the DNA, and then these red dots is where we make protein. And so we learn about them, and I want you then to go into your kitchen or go into your household and make a model with things that you find at home that represent these different structures that we learn about.
Okay.
Like different organelles. See these ER, these different organelles that we learn. And then make a list of, you know, what is what and what it does. A sort of a legend, like, and you know, sometimes like for the mitochondria, I'm always thinking it makes energy, so let me put a battery there or something like that, you know. So it kind of be a little creative. And I found this activity in the kindergarten section, and I thought it was really cool. Part of the class is part of trying to make it real life based in some ways. I ended up terming, say, kindergartification of some activities. That kind of works. And you know, some you know, a lot of students have kids at home, and they can bring them in and have a little activity around it or so. Anyway.
So I'm assuming that we have to take a picture of this and upload it.
Oh yeah, and then you take a picture of it and upload it and say what
okay.
A little bit. Don't do too fancy. It's not about the fancy, it's about the activity, about doing it.
Okay.
Sort of having a good experience with it.
Now I see we have a test coming up.
Yes. So let's do that. That's a good point to go. What were you going to ask? Sorry.
Just kind of get a feel of how you do your testing.
Let's do that. So this week we're looking at cells and then tissue levels. Want to go into those a little bit, or are you okay?
No, we can go into them. Yeah, that would be great.
So let's do that real quick. But actually, before we do that, let's do the test, because what I want you to know on that is this review. And I think I'm going to be in class a little bit tomorrow too. But under the review, I have all the main concepts listed that I want you to know and spelled out what they are.
Okay.
So basically, as you work through the material, I want you to have a look at these tabs as well. Make sure all of this is what I understand all of this. Or even better, you print them out and have them next to you and annotate, because my tests are open book.
Okay.
I don't want you to, I mean, yeah, of course, it's great to memorize, but I don't want you to focus solely on the memorization process. I rather have you integrate the information at least on the lecture side. And then, of course, in the lab side, you also have the anatomage, and that's more memorization there. So as you work through the different chapters, make sure you take a look at this test review and utilize the test review as you study to make sure you understand, or also do, when you feel overwhelmed, it's like, no, he only wants to know this, what's on this list for the test. If I know this, I'm going to be okay, and I can have this list with me during the test.
Okay.
So I also want to make sure we take a little bit of that pressure off, because tests can be scary, and we don't need to make it extra scary.
Yes. And now that test, is that going to be in person, or are we going to be doing that online?
No, that's online.
Okay.
You've been using this test, the quiz, all the questions are in the same kind of format, like
Okay.
after the lectures. It's that same quiz application within the Canvas that we use, and it's the same thing basically. So we're already familiar with the process of how to do those.
Yes.
It's got 55 questions, true, false, and multiple choice on this one. I think I give you 75 minutes on that, and you have 1 attempt for it.
Okay.
But that's just test stuff. And then, if anything goes awry because of the computer or whatever, you just shoot me a prompt, we'll figure it out. We're not here to, punish anybody. I want to try to make it as easy, not easy that you don't need to know stuff, but easy that you're not having an anxiety attack. Like
yes.
I have to. Let's go into a little bit of the cytology, and then
Okay.
close it out after that, I think. So the videos don't show, it's too slow. But again, this site cells, or the cell structure, and what we do here. And so we're looking at what's inside this one basic form of life. So a cell is a bacteria is a cell, can be a cell, a single cell, can be multiples. But that's the foundation of life, these cells. And they all have all these little organs in them, it's like our organ systems. They have things that they need to get done, and they have these little, the genetic material where all the protein cookbooks is in here. And then we have means to copy that, what we need to make the protein. And here are these red things that make the proteins. And then we got these weird blobby structures that can wrap around things and create little vesicles and hold the proteins that we send outside the cell, for example, and ship them around. So that's like the post office. So I look at these things like a village. Like, what do we need in a village? We need a factory. We need knowledge for a factory. We need a post office. We need a powerhouse. That's the mitochondria, makes the ATP. And so we have a few other ones. This is digestives, lysozymes. Everything that comes in gets attached to a lysozymes, and then it breaks down chemically what's in those vacuoles, what comes in, these vesicles. So it's talking all about these structures in here. And so it start with a cell membrane, and then here are these organs, these organelles, because they're all tiny. They call them little organs, so that's organelles. And then the other part, of course, that we talk about a little bit in here is the hereditary material, is the DNA stuff. And we just have one slide, a few descriptions, and the video goes into it. And then what do we actually use in the DNA? And then we get into the genetic code, into these different structures that, have you ever wondered why it looks like that, right? And so there's these molecules that come from this outside in, and they attach to each other, and there's 4 of them. And ultimately, which one comes after the other one in sequence determines what protein we make, because that's really what it is. It's a cookbook for proteins, is the hereditary material. And so that's then described in this protein synthesis section, where it has these 2 steps. And first step is we make a copy of that DNA because we want to protect it. And the copy then goes outside of the nucleus, the center of the cell that's most protected. It's like the brain. But then that strand goes to the outside, the nucleus, into these red dots that we saw in that first slide. And then that's how we make proteins, and how proteins are basically amino acids after amino acid after amino acid. And I think we had that in the We had that in the chemistry chapter, right?
Yeah, some of that in there.
Something like that. And so that's what that talks about. So that's part of this chapter. That's quite an important step, and a little bit sometimes takes a little time to fully understand. But I try to break it down. And, if you start with the fundamentals, just go through it a few times. I put a fair amount of videos here, like that's one here, but I think a lot of it is as little videos from other people that I think are really cool. And then the second part that's a bit heavy on this chapter is the cell division. What does happen when the cell divides and when the cell grows? And the main part there, the problem is, well, basically the cell gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and at some point it cuts in half and makes two cells out of it. Now, how do we organize what gets put in what side and what gets put in the other side? That's the challenge with that. And so what really is the biggest challenge with that, because mitochondria, you can have 3 on one side and 2 on the other side. You still got some, on both sides. But when it comes to the DNA, you got to be very careful which one goes to which cell, which daughter cell they call them, these two cells. And so this is really about copying that DNA and then making sure that a copy, half of each goes to each of the daughter cells. And that's what this process describes mostly. Because that's the most delicate part in the cell, is the DNA. That's why it gets always so much attention. And see, there is a whole analysis, a video of that. So just watch that a few times until you understand, if it's not that clear in the beginning, or maybe you start with that versus watch my video on those. Maybe that's even better, because they're really good. They're really well done these days. Anyway, so tissues are, when we look at the bodies, these fabrics, we have 4 different types of tissues. We have nervous tissue, muscle tissue, epithelial, and connective tissue. And so this chapter goes through all of the different ones well, actually, we're going to go through epithelial and connective in this chapter, and then bone we cover because that's part of connective, but then nerve and muscle we cover when we cover those systems. We go deeper into those microscopic kind of things that are important there. But epithelial tissue is pretty much our surface, the skin, the insides, the inside linings of blood vessels, the linings of the tubes, and so for gut linings, and the glands. The glands are also epithelial tissue. Go through this chapter, we go through different characteristics. We go through how does it look, what is it made of, what do we call it, how can we, how does it appear? Is it one layer or multiple layer? And then what do we call that? Or what are the different, for example, the extensions they have here? What are these for? In these tissues? Like this connective tissue is like everything. It's like you have adipose tissue is connective tissue, tendons are connective tissue, cartilage is connective tissue, bone is connective tissue, blood is connective tissue. So it's very vast, and it talks about the vastness, and what it talks about really is the commonalities and why it is all so vast in there. And then I'm going to focus on cartilage, which is, the ends of bones, or the nose end, or the ears. And then I focus on bone specifically, because after this chapter, the next thing that we do is we go into learning about the different bones. We start learning about the skull. We start learning about the appendicular and axial skeletons and those bones that make that up, before we then go into the muscle tissue and learn about muscles. So that's what this chapter here is mostly about. So it's kind of interesting. It becomes slowly a transition where we have this microscopic thing that we don't know what we're really looking at, and get into the stuff that we can actually see with the naked eye.